My name is Warren Miller. I'm with Fountain Works, and we're part of the team that's been supporting this project. Very pleased everyone is joining us. I want to just quickly do a couple of housekeeping items here. We have in front of you the agenda for the next couple of hours, but in terms of navigating Zoom, for those who aren't familiar, at the bottom of your screen, you have a toolbar there. And one thing we'll ask is if you're able to keep yourself on mute, that'll help reduce some of the background noise. And the other is that if you have any technical issues, please use the chat and just look for technical support, and we have folks that can help you out and make sure that you're ready to go. And again, we appreciate everyone being here, and I'd like to turn it over to Julie White to kick us off this morning.
Thanks, Warren. Really excited for this final closeout meeting of our NC Transit Cares meeting. Want to first thank all of the participants, all of our transit systems and MPOs and RPOs and our partners in this effort that has been many months in the making. When we started this effort pre-COVID, this was going to be all about innovation, and we were really excited to do that. And then COVID turned the whole world on its head. And what I thought this team did so very well was the way that they examined how we could turn this toward addressing COVID in innovative ways. So I think it was a wonderful opportunity that we took advantage of to examine how our transit systems can address providing their service in COVID, address the immediate disruptions, and then the long-term disruptions. And I think we've done some really phenomenal work toward that end. So I'm so excited to have this day come to fruition, and I'm thrilled to introduce our secretary, Eric Boyette. Eric was appointed secretary of the DOT in February of 2020. With more than 20 years of experience in state government, he began his career at the DOT and has served in several leadership roles, including our Chief Information Officer, our Inspector General, and our Division of Motor Vehicles Commissioner. In April of 2017, he was appointed Secretary and State Chief Information Officer at the North Carolina Department of Information Technology. In this role, he led the State Department responsible for all IT procurement, state cybersecurity, operational services. I could go on and on. He was in charge of all the tech. And that makes his transition back to DOT even better. We are so fortunate to have him here, having played such a wide variety of roles in this agency and have grown up at the DOT. He's a phenomenal leader for us, and he's really excited about our work in the modes. So I'm thrilled to have him kick us off today.
Thank you, Julie. And also, I want to extend a big thank you to Congressman David Price, who's with us today. I know his schedule is very busy, and I want to thank you for being here and helping us today and sharing some wisdom with us also. But I'd also be remiss if I didn't share that many of you may not know, but the gentleman, Jim Westmoreland, and I go back a long ways. I actually was a temporary at this agency working for Jim when he was in the signing unit. So Jim, I'm not going to say any comments because I know you go after me, and I'm afraid what you'll say afterwards. So I'm going to be very nice. But no, seriously, the department, you know, we're very aware, and as all of you are aware, you know, NC Transit Cares, as it incorporates our 98 transit systems across North Carolina, it's a great way, and a way that we show that, you know, it affirms our belief on. It's the best way for us to improve our transit systems when we come from the bottom-up approach. You know, no one in the state knows more about the challenges that the transit systems face other than the transit systems themselves. So as Julie mentioned, you know, now it's been more apparent than ever as we're dealing and struggling through, you know, dealing with COVID-19, this pandemic. You know, at NCDOT, we noticed and recognized there may be ways that you've responded and meeting needs of your community while ensuring safety, that you're doing such an excellent job. It's something that we recognize, and we want to continue to recognize you for your efforts there. But I can tell you, despite, you know, these difficult times, our department has not halted. We continue to look at ways that we can continue to support the transit systems. And one of those ways has been through administering the CARES Act funding from FTA. We're also applying for and receiving federal grants. That's something that I always call Julie out about, the way her and her team do such a great job of looking for federal grants and way we can substitute funding for our department. One of the ways is through piloting and emerging mobility concept and technologies. So there's a lot of ways that our department is continuing to help. And in fact, with the FDA CARES Act funding and discretionary grant opportunities, we're very close to securing funding needed to implement many of the ideas that are recommended through this NC Transit Cares project. I'm very glad and very proud of this team for that. And as you've seen, DOT is committed to improving not only all of our modes, but definitely our state transit systems. It's something that we want to make sure that we all have the resources we need and the tools we need to succeed. The tools are very necessary, and it's something that we want to make sure that we help and we do our part to make sure we push our transit systems forward to where they should be. And I hope that what we've started here in North Carolina, the Transit Care Project, is something that is very similar, and something, the communication, the collaborations that we're having, and those forums, it won't stop. They'll continue. We've got to have those in our future to continue to be successful. Something we're also very proud of. And one thing we always talk about here at DOT is, we have to be good leaders. We also have to practice what we talk about and how we preach what we're doing. So one of those ways is, we've acknowledged the necessity and importance of streamlining and enhancing our multimodal programs. So one of the ways Julie and her team, they've actually combined what used to be our public transit and our bike and ped divisions into one integrated mobility division. So that's one thing that we're doing internally to help us streamline opportunities for the transit communities. And it's also being done to make sure that we're ready. We've got to be ready for emerging and evolving mobility needs for the future. And how do we connect for the multimodal industry, and how do we make sure we're ready? It's got to be that. We have to be in that reality of prepared for the future. And we're just excited. I can't tell you, Julie actually said it very best when I often, there's a lot of, when you have the transportation board and you have different opportunities to sit on different committees, I had the luxury of choosing which one. And I often sit in the multimodal committee because it's exciting to me. Something that I see a lot of opportunity for tech and a lot of ways that we can improve and help. We got to help each other. We've got to partner. And I think that's where our agency can be a good partner. With that, I just want to say thank you. I do have to jump on another presentation, so I'm going to head off. But I want to thank you all. I think now, Julie, I turn it back over to Jim. I don't know if Congressman Price needs to go next to make sure he gets to his meetings just as well.
Yeah, I want to turn it over to David Howard, if you don't mind. Thank you again, Mr. Secretary, for being here. We appreciate your involvement and your energy around this initiative, and understand that I am thankful and blessed to have met you back in the day, and to continue with such a strong relationship, and know that I'm here if there's anything that we can do for you. So thank you very much. David Howard.
I want you to tell us about him being a temp. This seems like an interesting story.
I may have to wait to hear this, but it was very good. Very positive, David. Very positive.
Obviously. All right. Good morning, everyone. I am David Howard, Chief Deputy Secretary for North Carolina's Department of Transportation. I'm happy to be with you today and to salute you for your important work that you're doing to improve public transportation in North Carolina. It is now my great honor to introduce you to our next speaker, North Carolina Congressman David Price. Congressman Price represents North Carolina's 4th District, a rapidly growing research and education focused district that includes parts of Orange, Durham, and Wake counties. He received his undergraduate degree from UNC Chapel Hill and went on to Yale University to earn a bachelor's degree in divinity and a PhD in political science. Before beginning his service in Congress in 1987, he was a professor of political science and public policy at Duke. He is the author of 4 books on Congress and the American political system. Congressman Price currently serves on the House Appropriation Committee and is the chairman of the Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Appropriation Subcommittee. He also serves on the House Budget Committee and is a member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, the State Department, and Foreign Operations. He is a recognized leader in foreign policy, serving as the chairman of the House Democracy Partnership, which he initiated to help strengthen parliaments in emerging democracies. In North Carolina, Congressman Price's constituents know him to be a strong supporter of education, accessible health care, affordable housing, clean air and water, and improved transportation alternatives. Congressman Price is a native of Irwin, Texas, and he lives in Chapel Hill with his wife, Lisa, and they have 2 grown kids and 2 grandchildren. So with that, Congressman Price, I welcome you to give us some remarks this morning.
Oh, thank you, Secretary Howard. Glad to see you again, and appreciate that kind introduction. Are we on camera here with the way we need to be?
You're fine.
All right. My feedback loop here is a little defective, but it looks like we're in good shape. So Secretary Howard, again, thank you. Thanks to, glad to see Secretary Boyette, Jim Westmoreland, Julie White, all of you who have put this show on. I appreciate the chance to participate and also your flexibility in arranging for my appearance. I'll just bring a few words of greetings as the Secretary did, but I do want to underscore a couple of things that I think you'll be interested in terms of the funding situation, both the emergency funding and the regular funding for the federal funding streams that you count on, and also to reflect for just a minute on how important it is that you've organized in this way. And I know you've done a pivot with the coming of COVID. We all have in various ways, but it's fortuitous, I think, that you had gotten this organization together before that hit, and it's certainly going to facilitate our response across the state. So we are involved, as the Secretary said, in the organizational sessions for the 117th Congress. As I speak, they're having leadership elections that will choose our people going forward on the Democratic side. And I will join those meetings in plenty of room, plenty of time to cast whatever votes I need to cast. I think the first thing I want to say is to recognize and thank many of the people on this call and the people you work with, the people you are responsible for deploying every day. Thank you for the adaptations you've made and the service you've given during this pandemic. I think we're all aware of our bus and transit operators, our paratransit drivers, our support personnel, people who run the agencies, people who do the maintenance. You know, everybody who's kept us going through this pandemic. This has been very hard on transit, this whole situation. At the same time, transit has for many been a lifeline in continuing to get to work, continuing to get to services, continuing to get where they need to be. And so the extraordinary efforts people have made to keep the systems running and to keep them safe and healthy and to keep the passengers safe and healthy, all that is a great service. And I want to be the first to thank you, because we do count on that across the state of North Carolina. We know that our state is rapidly growing, rapidly diversifying in our population and in our needs, and certainly in our transportation needs. So we have various ways of getting beyond just the single passenger or single driver automobile and getting people around. And transit takes many forms, and it's going to have to take many forms in the future. And that full range, that full spectrum is represented in this organization. So thank you for getting this together and for including me. Even before the coronavirus emerged, transportation leaders in our state recognized that innovation would play a key factor in the future of transit, future of automation, of rideshare services, of on-demand bike share systems, all these other micro-mobility options have changed the transportation picture. And these developments considered great leaps forward in science and technology. This means that traditional service and commuting practices are being disrupted and being changed. And you all are on the cutting edge of that, of course. Many people, most people now, have more choices than ever when it comes to getting from point A to point B. And others are getting out of their cars entirely, relying on transit to get to school or work. So these changing circumstances are important to understand, both from a policy perspective and an operational standpoint. I'm confident that no matter what the future has in store, transit is going to remain a key factor when it comes to creating and sustaining what we call livable communities. In that same vein, Transit Cares represents an organized and concerted effort to identify problems and opportunities, to develop new strategies, and to disseminate best practices across the state. COVID-19 has made this effort, it's changed the character of this effort, but it's made it even more important. In my meetings with transit agency leaders and advocates, I hear of the same challenges in the midst of the pandemic: dramatically reduced ridership, the elimination of fare collection, and in many cases, expenses associated with acquiring protective equipment, implementing enhanced cleaning requirements. And as some people return to transit, a new problem emerges. How do you prevent overcrowding? How do you maintain distancing, and so on? Transit Cares is already anticipating what agencies will need to address these challenges. I know you'll be talking about all this morning. And so I'm happy to help kick you off and commend this quest for resiliency and for not just avoiding further disruptions, but adapting to new realities. I am chairman of the Transportation HUD Appropriations Subcommittee, and as such, each year we're crafting a transportation bill. I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. We are on our way to having the bill in place, we hope, for the current fiscal year. We, of course, have also been involved in the emergency legislation. And I'm glad to hear the CARES Act mentioned, because the CARES Act did originate in the Congress a few months into the pandemic. That was signed into law in March. This infusion of resources was, of course, badly needed. And so the infusion of resources from the CARES Act was badly needed. While the impact of COVID had been disproportionate on agencies that relied heavily on fare box revenue, it's clear that all transit agencies are affected by this pandemic in one way or another. So we had that package of relief. That money is still being helpful, of course, but it's running out. It has run out in many instances, and it's been clear for a long time that we needed another infusion of aid and support, targeted toward our transit systems in getting this done. The HEROES Act, and then a second iteration, the HEROES 2 Act, has been passed by the House. But it has not been acted on by the Senate. That's a very familiar story, I suspect. HEROES, the second version of the HEROES Act, included $32 billion for transit agencies to be distributed through the traditional formula, as well as a separate funding stream for transit agencies to apply directly to FTA for relief. So that's the basic structure of it. For now, I'm afraid there are more questions than answers about what the Senate's going to do and what this rather erratic president is going to do about that needed aid. Republicans have refused in the Senate, the leadership of the Senate has refused to go above $500 billion in the overall package. And of course, the package isn't just about transit. It's about unemployment. It's about small businesses. It's about, and a lot of the dispute is about state and local governments and the services they render and the kind of support that they need. So We had the spectacle before the election of Secretary Mnuchin and Speaker Pelosi inching closer to a hero's agreement around the $2 trillion level. Now that the election is over, I very much hope that in this lame duck session, which of course is coming up in early December, we're going to be continuing in early December, very much hope we can get an agreement and get this aid out the door. And of course, transit and many other agencies and programs will benefit as a result. We still have a ways to go. So, and then finally, before I close, let me just mention the fiscal 21 bill. We did pass our fiscal 21 transportation HUD bill back in the summer. We masked and distanced and marked up our bill in a rather strange scene there in the committee room, and brought 10 of the 12 appropriations bills to the House floor and passed them. Again, no Senate action, but there has been some progress on that front. In recent days, we've gotten from our Senate counterparts some draft proposals, which is going to pass, I think, as their version of this year's appropriations bills. And so we're actively working with our Senate counterparts. In my case, that would be Susan Collins of Maine, Jack Reed of Rhode Island, and then Mariel Diaz-Balart, my Republican counterpart on the House side. We're working and we have an agreeable working relationship. And I'm confident we can produce a good bill. Unfortunately, it's not just about our bill, it's about 11 others as well. And so exactly how much we can get done in this lame duck session, whether we can, certainly got to avoid a shutdown on December 11th. But the real question is, do you just have a continuing resolution that takes you further into the year, or do you get the appropriations bills together in an omnibus bill and pass them in December? That I very much hope we can do. And that will give your agencies and our state DOT a degree of certainty as to the funding levels and when the funding is coming and when the applications can be submitted when appropriate, and so on and so on. So those are two big items: the next installment of disaster aid, and then the regular appropriations bills, and then I think further down the road, and not too much further down the road, with the new administration, the new Congress, we're going to face the question about infrastructure investment. We've talked about it a long time. In fact, Infrastructure Week has become a kind of punchline. I don't want it to be a punchline anymore. You know, we do need serious attention to the infrastructure in this country. And now with the pandemic having hit us and the economic recovery staring us in the face, it's even more important to have a major infrastructure initiative, all modes. And by infrastructure, I mean broadband, I mean housing as well as transportation. That investment is long overdue. It will not be easy to come by. Nothing is these days politically, but I think the advocacy of the people on this call, the advocacy of our state governments, our state DOTs, that crosses party lines, and it needs to, because we are going to have a lot of demands on us, not just to do the relief, not just to do the regular funding, but to really initiate some serious investment in all modes of transportation across this country. And of course, you're the people in the best position to testify to the priority of that investment. So I wish you a good morning, a good discussion. We will look forward to. I have staff on the call. We'll look forward to the kind of wrap up in terms of what you discussed and the ways we can help. And we look forward to the coming congressional session and coming administration in Raleigh. This is a time of fresh starts and new beginnings, even in the midst of a pandemic. We need to chart our way forward, and you're helping us do that. This meeting can be a very important step in that regard. So thank you, and best wishes for a successful meeting.
Thank you, Congressman Price. We appreciate your continued leadership and support, and it means a lot to us that you would invest your time being a part of the process this morning, and we look forward to continuing to work for you. And we will promise you that if you need us in any capacity to help you with anything in Washington, including advocating for certain bills or doing other things that we have a special, unique way of doing from both a state perspective and a local and a transit association perspective, please do let us know, because I think you're right. At the end of the day, this is a time for new beginnings. We're going through an unprecedented and have gone through an unprecedented year. But I think what you'll hear and what others will hear and understand today is really just the focus of all of the terrific work and innovations and ideas that are going on out there in North Carolina. We want to continue to be a leader. We want to continue to share our best practices and information with other folks across the country. Before you leave, I did want to give a shout out to our FTA representatives that are on the call. FTA, USDOT, both have been extraordinarily helpful as we've gotten into the implementation of CARES Act funding and as we've looked at other issues associated with COVID-19. FTA Regional Administrator Dr. Yvette Taylor was part of our kickoff meeting that we have for this session, provided some very good information around things that were going on from a federal perspective to address COVID-19. But it's the partnership, it's the relationships that exist, both, in this case, between the NC Transit Systems, NCPTA, the Public Transportation Association here in North Carolina, NCDOT, MPOs, RPOs, those that are on the call, that really have all come together, that have understood that innovation is something that's created based off of necessity and need, and we've certainly had those things that we've had to respond to. So thank you again for your time this morning. Again, let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you. You're a great, terrific leader for us in North Carolina and also up in Washington, D.C., and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks very much.
All right, so now it's my turn to spend just a few minutes going through and overviewing the process for those of you who haven't participated with us over the course of the past many months. And just real quickly, as Julie mentioned, this all started as a different kind of process. Go to the next slide, please. This all started as a different kind of project and process back at the first of the year. And nobody, I think at that point in time when we first came together as a group in February, anticipated anything like this that's happened over the course of 2020 and COVID-19 specifically. So credit goes to Julie White, to David Howard, to Secretary Boyette, the NCDOT, our partners in Ryan Brumfield and Heather Hildebrandt, who have been integral in making this project happen, that they saw the value of pivoting and going to a different focus for this initiative and the value that it would provide to the state. As I mentioned to Congressman Price, at the end of the day, this really has been sort of a unique and extraordinary opportunity that's presented itself for the NCDOT, the transit agencies in North Carolina, NCPTA, all to come together and sort of communicate, work together, innovate at a whole different level that was never anticipated when we first started this project. So the project is specifically focused on COVID-19 response. I think, and I will go through some other information here in a minute. We've heard a lot from transit systems across the state and received a lot of good information, a lot of great participation in this process. But we really know those impacts are broken down in sort of four different areas. One is safety, as Congressman Price mentioned. There's a lot of focus on the cost of providing for PPE. There's a lot of focus on safety of riders and employees that exist in transit organizations. There's a lot of focus on how do we reinstall public confidence in our public transportation systems. Ridership, we've heard from many of you, we know that ridership is significantly off. Hopefully things are starting to come back for some of you, but there's a whole new set of issues that we have to deal with there. In certain cases, we've heard systems that were off as much as 80% to 85%. We've heard issues associated with how those riders were able to use the systems. Certainly, as Congressman Price was highlighting, funding and revenues continue to be a significant impact. I know from a couple different perspectives that everybody continues to be anxious and nervous about the future because we're all getting ready to go into our next fiscal year budgeting cycles for 2021. And we all know that from the perspective of looking at those budgets and sort of projecting revenues or lack thereof, that there's going to continue to be some challenging times that we're going to have to come together. And services, in many cases, there was some innovative types of things that were done relative and impacts related to services. Obviously, I know here in Greensboro, I think High Point as well, the systems had to stop operations for a day or some period of time to allow both employees and riders to adjust to things that happened because of COVID. We've also heard reports about other agencies that have provided services to locations that stopped. And then finally, this initiative really is all about how can we find those ways to work together and sort of exploit both existing and new innovations and strategies that are out there to respond to this effort. Next slide, please. So, and there's a lot of stuff on this slide. I'll hit the highlights of this thing. As I've already mentioned, this wouldn't have been possible without the leadership of NCDOT, but also more importantly, the involvement of all of our transit agencies across the state in the key stakeholders. So early on, we identified a need and value of having David Rue and NCPTA involved in this. And there's been some terrific connections and things that have unfolded both from this process and because of COVID-19 in terms of higher levels of communication support efforts between the DOT and NCPTA. We also identified early on that we needed the MPOs and RPO associations involved in this initiative to be successful. They are our partners as it relates to funding, prioritization of needs. And so we elected to involve them in the effort in order to take advantage of their understanding of things that we were into and hopefully their ability to help us create effective solutions related to future implementation. So again, our goal is just real simply, we're to validate things that we were hearing from systems about the challenges and impacts associated with COVID-19. Really saw this as a unique opportunity to promote a higher level of network and information and idea exchange between the DOT and the transit agencies on response and best practices. And boy, have we heard a lot about that, and are we just overly impressed with everything that's going on out there. And then to focus on developing a priority list of things that we need to follow along with. So as Julie mentioned, as Congressman Price mentioned, Secretary Boyette, there's a lot of things out there that are happening in the space of transit and technology. At the end of the day, one of our tools in terms of helping with our service needs and our funding needs is going to continue to be focused on innovation and taking advantage of strategies and technologies that are out there to make ourselves more efficient, more cost effective, better able to provide services to the public. And then last but not least was to focus on building upon the great work that was done back in 2018 by what then was the Public Transportation Division of NCDOT in focusing on the strategic plan and how this all connected in with that planning effort. Next slide, please. So this just outlines sort of the approach that we've taken over the course of the past many months. Again, we technically started out this effort in February with a first Initiative Development Committee meeting. So the Initiative Development Committee was a group of invited representatives from different types of transit systems across the state. So we had a representative sample of urban systems and small urban systems and rural community systems. We got together again 4 times in total to provide input about the project. They provided oversight to our team and to the DOT in terms of carrying out the initiative. The second thing that you'll notice there is our effort to survey our transit providers. And this really was the foundational element that created a lot of the work that we'll talk about today and good innovations that you'll hear from existing systems today that provided us with the information to really launch this effort into a totally different direction. So, but for your terrific participation, input, and ideas, none of this would have really worked out to be the special initiative, and as we'll hear today, provide us with the good ideas that we have to get things started. As you see, we had 3 different meetings in different scheduled times and days. They were all virtual. We had originally planned in-person meetings, but quickly found out that was not going to be possible. We have learned a lot in this process in terms of implementing things and trying things and correcting things. I recall at our kick-it-off meeting again, where we had Dr. Taylor there. We had a lot of good information shared, both by her, information shared by representatives from one of our partner companies, WSP, that's involved in this initiative as well. So it started off in the right direction. Each one of our meetings had sort of focused breakout groups and activities. So we were able to drill down from existing innovations to new ideas to prioritization of new ideas. But each one of the meetings was very well attended. And again, I can't say enough about the participation of the systems. Next slide, please. So this gives you a snapshot of the Initiative Development Committee members. Again, a shout out, thank you to each one of you for being involved in this effort. You really did provide key information. And I think, and I'm sitting here staring at Julie, there was such a level of excitement after our February meeting. We had no idea we were going into this whole COVID thing, but there was such a level of excitement about what was going on in the space of transit and innovation and opportunities that existed both from a local and regional basis, that I think she and I both came away and we went into her office and we just really just said that was terrific, and we're just excited to be involved with the project going forward. But as you can see here, we had transit systems involved, certainly MPO and RPO representatives joined us in this effort as well. David Rue with NCPTA and everything that they brought to the table. And then our NCDOT leadership really made this an exciting, special initiative for the state. Next slide, please. This will give you some idea about sort of how we sort of charted our work and our ideas. So if you look at the first slide on the left about system survey and clarify, that really is where everything started in terms of identifying the impacts of systems, getting some feel for existing innovations, understanding how DOT may best be able to help, which led into the Kick It Off meeting where we talked about those new and existing innovations that were developed by systems. We talked about and broke out into groups to talk about new and other innovations or ideas that we wanted to learn about more, hear about more, which led into the Work It On meeting where we had a listing of 18 different new ideas developed. And we spent some time there talking about the challenge areas that were identified and specifically prioritizing to top 2 in each one of those challenge areas, what we wanted to talk about and develop implementation plans on, which sort of leads us to the point of today's meeting, which is really going to be focusing on sharing some of the good information out there that we've learned from the process, going through the top 8 innovations and really focusing on where we go next and some very exciting news towards the end of this meeting. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a sample of some of the survey results. I won't read through this. You can take it. We'll have this information as we've done before, where we'll compile it and we'll put it on the repository, which is something that we developed on behalf of this project. So we learned early on that there was a lot of interest in the project, a lot of information and ideas that were being shared that other systems wanted to benefit from. Ryan Brumfield with the DOT and our project manager say, well, hey, why don't we just create a project repository that we can stick all of this information on, as well as some of the best practice information that we're hearing from. So hopefully those of you with transit systems, this has been beneficial. But when you look through the survey results, again, it gives you sort of the framing of everything that we've talked about and everything that we've gotten into over the past couple of months that are sort of promoting today's launch meeting and set of good ideas. Next slide, please. I won't spend a lot of time going through this busy slide other than just to say this was sort of the focus of how we ran the Kick It Off meeting. The 2 things I will mention, one is when we went into this Kick It Off meeting, again, we had system representatives and breakout groups broken out by different system types. What we quickly learned was that was a good idea, but there was a better idea that related to these 4 focus challenges that I'll talk about here in a minute. That in effect, everybody was facing the same kinds of issues, and there really were 4 prevailing challenges out there that were needing to be addressed by this initiative. Next slide, please. So here they are, the 4 challenges we identified. How can we keep passengers and employees safe? Obviously, that's become a paramount issue as it relates to safe operations, as it relates to, more importantly, I think public confidence in using public transportation and how we're going to address that in the future. Ridership declines, we've talked a lot about that already. How can we offset ridership declines due to COVID-19? Some of the innovations and strategies that you'll hear about this morning will be directly responsive to that issue. Revenues and funding, obviously, with things that have happened, there's been some blessings and there's been some difficult challenges. So the CARES Act funding from the federal government was a blessing. Some of you have found some innovative ways to help offset some of your issues. Obviously, the state funding reduction was a challenge and an impact to many, if not all of you. And I think that's part of what we'll talk about here in a minute with at least an innovational funding, a focus on how we can continue to all work together to put our best foot forward and share information that will be important to our both elected, appointed, and other members out there as it relates to understanding the impacts of COVID-19. And then finally, how can we move to new service patterns as needs evolve? We've got some specific innovations that address that, but that's really focused on the area of how can we become more effective, more efficient in how we're providing services, and really understand the changing dynamics. And as Congressman Price noted, the disruption that's happening in the public transportation space. Next slide, please. The final slide here just gives you some idea about how we've cascaded these ideas and how we, again, it was all fundamentally started with the survey, the meetings, 18 innovations, down to a top 8 that we'll talk about today. But I will close before I introduce David Rue to take us to our next portion of the meeting. And just again, thanking first and foremost all of the systems who have been involved in this initiative and the great information ideas that you have provided. I really do think that we are on to something here. And as we talk about later on some of the innovations and follow up, we're going to continue to need your help, your assistance, your ideas, your energy, your support to move this thing forward and really take advantage of everything that we've already done. And we're looking forward to doing that. So with that, next slide, please.
Hey,
I
Jim,
just wanted to, yes. Yes,
this is
Julie.
Julie. I just, if I could just for 1 second before you make that transition, I
Sure.
took the time to flip through our 172 participants.
Yes.
And I just wanted to recognize, in addition to the incredible speakers that we had this morning from our secretary and our congressman and our chief deputy secretary, and please bear in mind, a lot of you are just phone numbers, so I don't know who you are, but for the names I could make out, I really wanted to thank the senior leadership at DOT. We have deputy secretaries participating with us today. We have division engineers. We have a lot of our senior management in headquarters. I thought that was just such an incredible statement about the commitment to multimodalism in our transit systems department-wide. I saw members of the General Assembly. I wanted to thank particularly, I know I saw Representative Autry is with us today, and thank him. There may be others, as I said, that I can't see their names, but thank you for participating. I see members of the General Assembly staff, so thank you. I believe I see at least one, probably more board members from our DOT board. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the broad representation that's participating in this important topic today. Thanks, Jim.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie, for that. And again, thank you all for participating. And we know that you will gain good value out of this program today. But we also, as I pledged to Congressman Price, if you need us for any reason in terms of supporting your efforts to help with their jobs and the important work that you do in your communities or for the state, let us know. We're there for you, and we want to be a part of that process of making your communities better. So with that, I wanted to introduce David Rue. David is the Executive Director for NCPTA. One of the things that we set out to do from the very beginning was to establish a very strong partnership with David and the North Carolina Public Transportation Association. So many, if not all, of our systems are joined to NCPTA. And I can't say thank you enough to him and the members of NCPTA and the systems. There have been obviously some very important new and hopefully long-going connections created through this process between the transit systems and the DOT, which at the end of the day makes us all better, allows us to share information and best practices, and really focus on, more importantly, the needs of those who use our services in our local communities and in our regions. So with that, David, welcome, good morning, and looking forward to your part of the program.
Good morning, Jim. Thank you so much. And we look forward to the ongoing conversations with NCDOT and our partners across the state. Quickly, I want to say a word just about the importance of this project. From my vantage point, obviously the ability to share information, continue to work in our areas with innovation and sharing amongst our peers has been absolutely essential and critical, and will be going forward. So in this part of the program, we're blessed with outstanding leaders across North Carolina in our transit system. So thank you to all who are participating. You are helping communities and neighborhoods and neighbors, and I'm grateful. So we've got 3 strong panelists. I'm going to introduce them all together, and then we'll kick off with Scott, followed by Craig and Randall. Scott Ryan, Executive Director for PART, Craig Hughes, Director for Apple Cart, and Randall Conley, Director for McDowell County Transit. Thank you for your leadership, your innovation. And Scott, you're up.
Okay, very good, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I was asked to share a few things that we've done here at the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation as it relates to COVID. We've got a few things and a few slides I was just going to share and go through specifically dealing with some of our communication. And I'm not sure if that's going to come up on screen, but there we go. Okay, thank you. So the topics that I have, and I'll go through here very briefly, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that we've put in place here at PART on how we are reacting, how we're still moving forward, how we're trying to address all of our activities related to COVID, the pandemic, what it's meant to not only our service, but most importantly, how we're communicating, how we're reacting, how we're basically doing some business, some changes with our business. That is, as everybody can basically agree, I think, is we're not operating under normal circumstances, but we have many things and opportunities for us to go ahead and address and move forward with. So go ahead and there you go. Thank you. First part, if we go back to some of the very beginning, and not to belabor everything as far as where this all started, but one of the items that we were really dealing with here at PART is identifying the changes that we have to have, not only from our funding standpoint, but also how we're dealing with our business and our service and our van pool program and our call center activities, the business activities that we have in some of our regional programs with regards to our 4 MPOs in the triad, NCDOT, activities and projects that we had underway, and essentially where everything just came to a stop. Everything that essentially just needed to be reacted upon because we have initiatives and we have certain things that have stopped in terms of calls to action from our governor as well as across the state in terms, for shutting down and staying safe. So one of the first things that we did here at PART is when we were going through and essentially identifying essential personnel, we had certain staff members here at PART that were on a furlough. We had services that were halted, but we had people that were still needing jobs and still needing healthcare and still needing all the services that we provide. So we had put together a business continuity plan and really identified, and this business continuity plan that we have is really an ongoing working document, but it basically is just focusing and identifying what we have, what we need to address, adding to this business continuity plan so it's not forgotten about. And as you can see on screen, we basically prioritize these items with number 1 for everything that we're doing is basically still dealing with safety, looking at our people, looking at our staff, looking at our customers, looking at our business relationships that we have with our MPOs and our cities and state DOT for all the different regional activities we have. But for my discussions and what we're really going to go into is just share some of the things we have with number 3, and this is dealing with our communication and how important that is, that we just continue with that communication to share that information with people and for all of our customers and all the different ways that we've gone about it here at PART with regards to how we're communicating and reacting with regards to COVID as well as our business activities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So with our messaging and what we put in, what we're speaking of is dealing with our PART Express bus service. and the connectivity that we have with our cities of Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem, as well as Burlington, Graham, and the Link system. We have a van pool program here in the Triad that's essentially has been seriously impacted with COVID. As you can imagine, dealing with our social distancing, there's not a whole lot of van pool activities that you can anticipate, and we're really not talking about putting people in a van. Rural systems certainly are dealing with that on a day-by-day basis. But how is that also being impacted by our businesses? Because those businesses have made quite a few changes dealing with COVID, and many of them have implemented telecommuting measures. Many of them have actually had layoffs. And so our van pool program, which prior to the pandemic was at 52 van pool groups, and we had a very large program with a great deal of reduction of single occupancy vehicle. And as a result of COVID-19, we presently have 17 van pool groups. And so we've got a lot of information that's being shared, how we're adjusting, and all that going back and forth. Our party employees, yes, we have our employees that we've dealt with some furloughs, but also our contract employees. And so these are some things and decisions with regards to the pandemic and how we're adjusting to basically keep them secure with regards to their employment and their medical care, as well as their overall job and how they can support their family. I mentioned also previously some of our member agencies and what types of projects we have on hold, what types of projects are moving forward, as well as some of our activities that we have with some of our federal partners. Next slide, please. So expanding our communication, what we've done, we basically have, going back to our business continuity plan, looking at our communications, we have opened up, we've expanded, and a big shout out that I'll give with regards to my staff in terms of getting all this information out with our social media as it goes through Facebook, as it goes through Twitter, all the messaging, all the reoccurring ideas and activities with regards to safety, how we deal with these things, keeping some reassurances in place with regards to cleaning our buses, sending those reoccurring messages, not to make it just a continuous ongoing onslaught of, I've heard it before, we're not dealing, but what we're basically doing is trying to build that care, build that trust that we have, that we recognize it, that we have our people that also with what we do with our public services to build that safety. Next slide, please. We also have with regards to some of our communications, putting some of this onto our vehicles, not only the messaging that you see on screen, but also some of those reassurances that we have in terms of our additional PPEs, whether it's some barriers that we're looking at for protection of our operators, but also some adjustments that we've made with regards to our fare collections, how we have implemented different policies with regards to some of these safe practices that we've received from not only NCDOT, but also some of our federal partners, and sharing all those activities and those ideas about how we're all working together, how we need to address these items, but how we're also adjusting. Next slide, please. Some of those elements that we've also put in place has really been involved with our board of trustees. I have a very large group of elected officials here within the PART organization. I've got 22 elected officials that represent 10 counties, our 4 MPOs, our 4 largest cities, our 2 airports, as well as our NCDOT Board of Transportation members from Division 7 and Division 9. So we've gone through, as part of our business continuity and our communication, we've put together a great deal of adjustments that we've all made. So we have policies that we've put in place with regards to the activities as far as our benefits, our health insurances for our employees, but also our communications that have been put out with regards to our customers, our van pools, how we've made adjustments with regards to our van pool groups, how we basically have passed on reassurances as far as suspension of their payments because they're not in operation, how we've actually had some adjustments and some policy initiatives that have been put in place with regards to our budgeting. A big shout out with regards to our federal partners and our MPOs here in the Triad with regards to the CARES Act. If we did not have that, we would certainly be struggling a great deal with regards to just staying in business. And so the CARES Act funding, the MPO involvement with regards to being able to maintain our business, looking at how we're making adjustments with our business, and all these elements that we're putting together, sharing with our customers and sharing with our elected officials and sharing with our partners of how we're adjusting, how we put some things on suspense, how we've made adjustments to where some business practices are basically needing to adjust every day, just like our services are having to adjust every day. Next slide, please. So as we've gone through this process over the next, over the various several months and how we've all been adjusting, the one thing that we've recognized that's been beneficial, helpful from our standpoint, is to continue doing what you're doing in terms of sending out the messages, having those adjustments, sharing this with your board. If we have policies related to our service, if we've had some items that we've put in place in terms of our customers, what types of safety protocols, what types of our services in terms of everybody wearing masks, everybody having certain social distancing, how we're dealing with our cleaning, our van pool program, our call center. And for all of us that are dealing with this on a regular basis of providing public service, it is just so much, there's so much importance and need just to keep those flows of communication open and utilize those different portals that you have, whether it's your business or whether it's your emails or whether it's your things that you have on your social media, because at the end of the day, we're all still trying to maintain our sanity, still looking for the way that we're actually going to be adjusting in terms of what our new norm is, but also recognizing that these adjustments that we have in service and how we're communicating that, we've not got to the end, but we need to be flexible and we need to go ahead and just move forward, because without our service, as well as the service that many of our agencies provide, it certainly has some direct impact on our daily lives. And so keep those things open, be continuous, be consistent, and certainly prioritize with regards to the safety first. Last time. That's all that I had. I know that we're not opening questions right now, but please, anybody, if you have any questions or need anything from me, feel free to go ahead and reach out at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. It's Craig Hughes here with Apple Cart. I agree with Scott. Communication is vital, has been very vital throughout this entire process. It's been a big part of how we've responded locally to our passengers and to our partnering agencies. Full disclosure, we borrowed a list of ideas from our fellow transit systems, and you were a valuable resource throughout this entire process. So a lot of what you'll see when I go through this on things that we were able to accomplish and ways we address things, I borrowed from you guys just sitting back and listening. So I appreciate you guys being there for Apple Cart as well as for others. I want to start off, our response can be broken into 3 phases. The first one was the initial response, the second one's a summer response, and the third one's gonna be a late summer fall response. In our initial response, our COVID precautions, like everyone else, began to get going really in the first week of March. We started by reducing our routes. It was a good time because App State was on spring break and they didn't return for classroom instruction. So it's no big deal for us to stay on our break schedule, which for us, that meant going from 23 buses running per day down to 9. The reduced number of buses allowed us to use extra drivers to clean our vehicles hourly at our key transfer points. So and then on our vans and stuff, we were cleaned between runs. What we also did, we saw this big outcry of people wanting to know what we were doing to keep them safe. So we began listing our prevention measures on our website to communicate with the community and others. Posting information on our website and social media made it real easy for us to respond to those with questions about measures we were taking. And it's also, a good reinforcement tool with our employees, to keep, this is what we say we're doing, and this is what we need to be doing. We hired a contractor to come in on Sunday nights and fog our vehicles once per week to disinfect them, in addition to the cleaning. Since our ridership was reduced and App State students went home, there was no immediate need for us to limit our number of passengers. We were able to handle things with the 9 buses. May was probably our biggest, our lowest ridership totals. We were down to 330 on some days. And it's usually around 1,000 when classes aren't in session. We were able to continue to be determined not to. We were determined through this whole process not to be the cause of an outbreak. It seems like folks were more than ready or quick to point a finger at someone if an outbreak occurred. So we want to make sure that we were not the cause of an outbreak. Employees began utilizing the COVID-19 leave that was available high-risk employees were staying at home. Many of our drivers are seasonal, so it didn't really create a hardship for them. We also, another thing we added was the rear door entry. I think a lot of systems were doing that. What we would do is on the buses have the rear door entry, and then we would rope off the front section because we didn't have barriers in place at that time for the drivers. We required the roof hatches on our vehicles to be open to increase the ventilation because we wanted that circulation going through there to prevent spread. And then one of the key things that we started doing, and I really appreciate some of our university friends for organizing this, we began participating in a discussion group of North Carolina University Transit Systems to share ideas and experiences as we move towards the fall and the uncertainties associated with ridership demand in the fall. So I want to thank Byron Bryant with NC State and Wood Davidson with ECU Transit for getting that group together. Through all of this, we were in constant communication with our health department, with the university, and with other local governments. So I want to move on to our summer response. In summer, we began assimilating our passengers to mask wearing and social distancing. We were concerned that the mask might be an issue, but it really hasn't been. We followed the guidance identified in the Executive Order 147 back in June and honored the exceptions when necessary as required by the executive order. So again, it's not been a major issue for us. Over the summer, we started limiting passengers on our buses that are larger than 35 feet to 20 passengers, and then 15 passengers on the 30-foot buses. We were trying to anticipate, for the higher demand in August when classes start back at the university, but without a clear direction from the university about in-person classes versus virtual, it was very difficult. We started marking seats to ensure social distancing and to assist in maintaining the prescribed bus capacities. This is where we also started installing driver barriers on our vehicles. They're Lexan doors for the buses and heavy vinyl curtains for the vans and SUVs. The doors were ordered directly from Gillig, our bus manufacturer, to ensure a stable design and operation. We wanted the doors to work and operate like they were installed from the factory. We installed hand sanitizing stations on all our buses and had hand sanitizer in all our vehicles. We also continued sanitizing the buses at key transfer points. One of the unique things for us was that we ordered windows to retrofit to all our buses. 2 windows, one in the front of the bus and one in the rear on opposite sides to increase the airflow from the buses. When our partnering agencies, sometimes they have a tendency to complain about us having a fund balance, but we look back and say, if it wasn't for that fund balance, we wouldn't be able to do things like install these buses and react to a COVID-19 event like this. We began disseminating informational graphics about our COVID-19 measures. This was a big part of our communication strategy that we planned to start on anyway, but to help improve our brand in the community and explain to the community what benefit they got from us and what return on their investment, what return they got for the return on investment. But we also saw it as a great opportunity to communicate the COVID-19 precautions that we were taking with our partners and the general public. So if anyone's interested in some of the things we did with our communication strategy, I'll be glad to share it with you. Got a few of them on this slide, but we've also got them on our social media with Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. As part of that communication strategy, we released our first COVID-19 video. It's a brief 1-minute PSA about some of the measures we implemented to keep everyone safe from COVID-19 on our vehicles. And then the final step in the summer, we temporarily removed some stops from service to increase the circulation of air on the buses to keep the bus from stopping, and also to reduce time spent on our vehicles. These were mainly at stops that had low ridership anyway, like less than one or less people per day. And they were also within a quarter mile of another stop. So next I want to talk about our late summer and fall response. In late summer, we released our How to Use Apple Cart video, which is basically, you know, a brief introduction for new users to our transit system. We want to make sure passengers knew what to expect on August 17th when classes started at the university, or people that might be coming into the area, so that they felt safe on the bus and weren't confused about how to find the bus or where their stops or what time to expect the bus. So we continued also continued our informative graphics campaign. The windows came in and we were able to install those on the buses to increase the ventilation. And then we had been paying a contractor to come in and fog a lot of our buses on that sunny night, as I mentioned earlier. But you know, we went ahead and purchased a fogging machine to sanitize our own vehicles in-house. We saw this as a more cost-effective way to handle the sanitizing. And then finally, in the late summer fall response, we released the video, The Benefits of Apple Cart. And this is geared towards life after COVID-19. And I think it really does an excellent job of telling our story in less than 1 minute. And I think that's going to be vital for everybody moving forward through this is, you know, as we come out of COVID-19, start reminding, you know, your partners of how important your transit system is to your community. What services are you provide? You know, who's the direct benefit? Because it's more than what they may think. And so this video that we put out just kind of encompasses all of our agencies, and the folks were more than willing to participate in it. So our infomercials, right now there's 3 of them. I'm going to wrap up here in just a second and finish up with our Apple Cart is keeping you safe during COVID-19 video. And it's one of a series of the previously mentioned videos that were part of our communication strategy. It's another way for us to share our story, you know, other than in print or graphics. And it also allows us to share through different types of media, and our partners can use them when budget discussions start up. You know, these videos just have multiple uses and purpose, and hopefully we can do some more in the future. Thank you.
We are Apple Cart, Boone's very own transportation system. Like most people, we are taking COVID-19 very seriously, and we've missed you. It hasn't been the same without you. As classes begin, there's a number of things we will be doing to help keep you and our staff safe. We're performing daily screenings for all our employees, disinfecting vehicles daily, increasing ventilation on our buses, and requiring masks for drivers and passengers. We're looking forward to seeing your colorful face coverings. As you board our buses, please remember to enter through the front, and when you reach your stop, exit by the back. Be sure to practice social distancing as much as possible while riding the bus. Think of it as extending your personal bubble just a little bit. We're glad to have you back in Boone. Have a fun and safe semester, and we'll do our best to help you get to your destination on time. That's our promise. Apple Cart. We keep the high country moving.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Randall Conley with McDowell County Transit, and I'm pleased to have this opportunity to share with you all what McDowell Transit and McDowell's community partners are doing to respond to COVID-19. Next slide, please. Just a little background on what we did. Before the pandemic, we actually were taking clients to food hubs and to local food meal pickups to do meal deliveries. Meal pickups for those who were without transportation. And this kind of started during the pandemic with our seniors. Actually, we had senior citizens that ride every day who goes to the senior center to get meals and lunches and stuff like that. And, you know, once, you know, the pandemic hit, we really wanted to watch our senior riders. So we kind of try to sit down and think about how can we still get them to their meals without them actually having to come to the senior and be in a big setting. So we began taking meals to the seniors for senior delivery, which a lot of folks had heard about us doing that just through the grapevine, and they started calling in asking about how could we get meals and stuff like that when we used to ride and go pick up meals at these food deliveries. Next slide, please. In April, staff and along with other community partners, we sat down and we was going through a couple of ideas on how we can get these folks here and in a time that, you know, trying to keep everybody socially distanced at the same time. So we began going through calling folks and asking if, you know, if we did meal deliveries, would they be interested in receiving a meal and stuff like that. And those meals, they have a week's worth of food in there. And also we send cleaning supplies to those households. And during this time, I reached out to our MDS for guidance on this situation. I was wondering if this is something we can do, or, you know, is it feasible for us to even try to pick this up? Because right now we're a new system. We have about 11 vans running on the road. Right now we still have 9 full-time drivers and 2 part-time so far. And we were still able to run this route and also be able to do our medical pickups, our hospital, our daily routine routes that we run now. After getting guidance from my MDS, we began to start looking in deeper into how we're gonna start picking folks up for this. Can you get the next slide, please? Residents were able to call in and set up meals, which we weren't really getting a lot of traction from at first until we started having to post food delivery request forms online, which that made us be able to start getting more people hearing about it and get more people in riding on this stuff. This program took a lot of communication between the match program as well as the Food Advisory Council and our food hub. Our dispatcher, she comes in and she would get in touch with the match program's dispatcher, and they will go through and contact riders and set up a route on for pickup. And those routes usually take we usually have about 50 plus deliveries on Tuesdays and Fridays. So it's starting to turn up pretty good. And like I said, with the pandemic coming on, a lot of people kind of got scared to ride with us. And so they began to stay in, and we was losing ridership. And this right here kind of helped boost our ridership back up and getting folks their meals that was in need. Next slide, please. You know, and this right here, I was kind of skeptical about the food delivery at first, because when we were taking it to the senior citizens, we just had a driver get out and they would take it to their front doorstep and leave it on their step, and they will come out and get their food and whatnot. But you know, just thinking about like liability issues and stuff like that, I kind of wanted to bring another person on board to help the drivers out. And so we contacted the Food Hub and we reached out to volunteer folks in the county, and they were able to come help out. We have a lot of people that works at the McDowell Mission Hospital turn up to come help out with these deliveries. You know, with the driver, like I said, with the drivers having to get on and off the van a lot, I was kind of scared that somebody could, you know, possibly get hurt and stuff like that. So that's the reason why we pulled in another volunteer to help out with those food deliveries. Next slide, please. So, like I said, looking at our numbers, we were trending down when the pandemic hit. I was having to rotate drivers on and off. we really only had people who were still working, who were essential workers going to work, and a few people like with medical issues that they have to take care of. So as our numbers were going down, we began to try to figure out ways how we could boost that ridership, and just seeing how the senior centers food deliveries were going at the beginning, which we only did a couple times because it was kind of a thing the senior center wanted to do with the little bit of money they had left in their contract. And we started seeing how that traction took on, and we began to go ahead and offer this service until the end of the pandemic, or until funding is ran out. Next slide, please. I was just the main thing about this was, just the communication between everybody and the community partners. That was the main idea of this situation, because we had a lot of folks that were not able to communicate and get in touch with us for these rides, and they were able to reach out to the Match. Match also offers other resource outreach for our citizens, so it connected them. We also have a Spanish and Latino dispatcher too to help those folks out as well. So we try to touch every part of the county. We go everywhere when it comes to food deliveries. It's a all-day type deal. We usually dedicate one full-time driver to that route, and it usually takes from about 9 o'clock to about 4 to finish. And they've been doing a really good job with the drivers and the volunteers of keeping everything sanitized and stuff like that. As they move throughout the routes, they usually stop, wipe down and stuff, and then they're able to continue on with their day. But I would love to take any questions. If you can email me or send me a message, I'd love to email. I can also do the chat while we're in the meeting right now. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Randall, thank you so much. And Randall mentioned a couple of the partners. One of those was McDowell Access to Care and Health, and they were recognized with a letter to Randall, and also Secretary Boyette recognizing the good work happening in McDowell County. Thanks to all our presenters. Jim, we'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, David. I'm going to turn it over to Morven of our team to sort of kick off this segment over talking about our innovation priorities. Morven?
Great, thank you, Jim. So as mentioned earlier, we have tied the 8 innovations we'll be talking about today to responses to the 4 biggest challenges faced by NC Transit. And as you can see, 3 of the 4 groups of innovations also build off the 2018 strategic plan, tactics and recommendations that many of you participated in. COVID-19, of course, is a new threat. It's a new challenge since 2018 and brings the challenge of how to keep our passengers and operators safe. So we're going to talk through each of these 8 ideas to get an understanding of the goals and the actions needed for each. Next. So the first innovation in the category of safety is to work to improve indoor air management in our transit vehicles and facilities. So this means improving airflow patterns, how efficiently the air is filtered to remove infected particles, and also how fresh air or outdoor air can be used to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission. Next. NCDOT has applied for an FTA COVID research demonstration grant to move this innovation forward. Grant awards are expected next month in December. And this would provide research funding to develop HVAC design concepts and guideline specifications for new vehicles and facilities. Next. One of the actions is to perform research on how airflow works in our transit vehicles. And we now know from detailed airflow studies of a restaurant in China at the beginning of the pandemic that the airborne transmission is real. The movement of infected air particles due to the HVAC system and the lack of ventilation in the restaurant caused the spread of COVID-19. So we want to take this research, these techniques, and study how airflow is happening on buses and in our facilities. Next. Another action will be to develop practical how-to guides for North Carolina agencies to provide some immediate guidance in the area of how to set systems on board buses and in facilities, how to open windows to maximize ventilation and airflow. And then longer term, this innovation will explore retrofit feasibility for existing fleets and facilities. The second idea, the second innovation in the safety category is to establish a transit health and safety accreditation program. And many agencies mentioned right at the beginning of the study at the Kick It Off meeting, having trouble sorting through the scientific information that was out there. And so this information would help by clarifying and streamlining health guidance to really understand conditions for elevated transmission, and then how various safety measures can play a role in reducing transmission of COVID-19. Next. Looking at actions needed to meet these goals, this would be development of a COVID-19 webinar for NC agencies. The UNC School of Public Health would develop the materials, and NCDOT would record and then verify attendance. There's a couple of further options in this innovation, depending on the availability of funding, which could include more detailed training geared towards agency key staff and executives with an examination at the end. Next. So if agencies choose to participate and complete the training, then NCDOT would present them with an accreditation seal of approval, which each agency could then use. APTA has a similar type program currently, which is voluntary and online, and some of our NC agencies are already participating in that, but this would be a specific NC Transit Cares initiative. And beyond the important step of training and information sharing on safety issues, an added benefit is that this accreditation by the agencies can then be used to market the program, to build awareness and provide knowledge to the public and passengers about all the safety measures that are in place. The second idea under this challenge is now how to work to restore ridership lost as a result of the pandemic. And the first idea is to develop an NC Transit Cares strategic marketing effort to rebuild trust in public transportation services. And this would involve cataloging current best ideas by NC agencies. We've just seen some excellent examples of that earlier this morning. And then also this innovation would research national best practices to ultimately create a pilot program marketing NC Transit. Next. Immediate actions would be to increase awareness of continued transit services and provide enhanced knowledge around the safety measures being taken by NC agencies. These could range from a no-cost option in which NCDOT creates graphics and content for agencies to use. Those would be stored on IMD's online repository. And another option in which market research could be performed to better understand and address rider concerns. And also one of the areas that we really heard from you during the course of this study is that how to reach underserved communities is a challenge. This is difficult in normal times. This has been especially difficult during the pandemic. So creating a marketing toolkit for hard to reach communities has been expressed as being important. Next slide. Actions also include establishing a working group with NCDOT to develop guidance for agency marketing plans with the goal of building a suite of resources that all agencies will have access to. And then longer term, seeking to increase and sustain demand for NC Transit by exploring development of a pilot program for transit marketing assistance and a statewide campaign. The second innovation in this category, and again, this is how to deal with declining ridership and hopefully restore lost ridership, is to create a mobile app for transit riders that could be used for trip planning, for real-time bus tracking, and that gives the passenger the ability to see how full a vehicle is before boarding, therefore helping with managing COVID-19 social distancing requirements, and then helping the rider feel more secure and aware of any potential crowding on the vehicle. Actions needed to meet this goal include establishing a working group to identify key needs and develop recommendations for the app functions. And very important to this task, surveying and working closely with transit agencies and what is needed from the app for their specific operations needs, as there won't be a one-size-fits-all solution. Actions here would also include conducting a peer review of transit systems. We know several NC agencies are already underway with development of their own apps, so complementing these efforts will be important. We would also complete a feasibility study that would create an implementation plan, looking at the costs and the schedule to implement. This could include vendor showcases. There are many providers for this type of app with different platforms and functions to offer. And then NCDOT would partner with agencies to pilot the app by developing specifications and issuing an RFP for vendors to respond to. And with a potential statewide procurement of up to 98 agencies, there would hopefully be good interest and a competitive response to the solicitation.
Thank you, Morgan. Let me cover the final 4 priorities that we've got for the initiatives here. So there was a lot of conversation around funding and funding flexibility. So this first innovation really looks at how we can better sort of understand what's out there in the universe of COVID-19 funding, things that have already been done and implemented, whether it's the CARES Act funding that we heard about from Congressman Price, some of our FTA programs, state funding, local funding, really with a focus on how do we sort of use those things more innovatively, differently, to help with response needs and impacts of our operations of services going forward. And then the final thing there is really to use this as an opportunity to explore new funding opportunities. We know that there are state agencies and other forms of both federal and state funding out there that are being used to address certain needs. I think Randall mentioned a while ago about the partnership they've established with their folks in McDowell County with food services. Maybe there's opportunities there to leverage those resources to better use it for multiple purposes versus a single use purpose. Also, potential opportunities for connecting them with state and local foundations, potentially to provide some support. And then finally, to follow along with some of Morven's recommendations a while ago, we believe there may be opportunities for the state to partner more directly with industry and vendors to help with some of these needs going forward as well. Next slide. So this, like some of the other recommendations, really focuses on convening, or in this case, expanding a work group. So as I mentioned before, there's been a lot of terrific connections made over this past year between NCPTA and IMD of the NCDOT. They've formed a work group that comes together probably weekly, if not monthly, to talk about things that are going on in the COVID-19 response arena, things related to funding, other strategies and ideas. We believe this would be a good opportunity to expand that group. Basically, again, break it down into 2 subcommittees, one that's focused on this element of existing programs and responsibilities and the new opportunities that exist out there, and then to implement those things. I think one thing that's important with this recommendation, and hopefully we still have representatives from FTA on the phone call with us, I think it's going to be important to have FTA involvement in this work group to really identify what are those opportunities with some of the federal funding programs and grant programs that are out there to best leverage those to higher and better use for North Carolina. Again, an example would be that we have a certain specific element of need in North Carolina, and there's a federal program, but right now it may be, for whatever reasons, prohibited from being used for COVID-19 response or other kinds of operational response components. Maybe there's some administrative way that we can work together to change that problem or to make things simpler, more importantly for systems as it relates to use of funding and billing and those kinds of things. Next slide, please. The next innovation really focuses on statewide data collection. We heard a lot from systems in this process about the need to have everyone on a common platform, the need to have information available related to ridership and operating trends and impacts associated with funding and service benefits. So funding is a significant area. So obviously with some of the things that happened from a state funding perspective this year, there remains a need and an imperative to have data available for key stakeholders where they understand the impacts of those kinds of changes and those decisions at the highest level. This would really look to form that governance strategy and framework for how statewide data would be collected, and then look at forming a common statewide database or collection system and technology requirements. Next slide, please. So the actions with this, again, would include convening or expanding a work group. There's already some work in the IMD division at NCDOT related to statewide data collection and systems that could be expanded and include representatives from other North Carolina systems to help understand the opportunities here. Look at developing these standards, developing an action plan, and then implementing an action plan with a real focus on a couple of things. One is it would be a great goal to have this work done quickly, and when we look towards implementation, having an ability to fund and implement the plan within a one-year period of time, making that a goal, making that as easy as possible on local systems so we can ensure for full access to the system that's developed and the technologies that need to be deployed. And as Vanessa with Wave Transit mentioned in our last meeting, really focus on ways to leverage what we already have in place and not recreate the wheel if we don't have to. So there's already a form of statewide data collection, federal data collection that takes place. Let's use and leverage those systems to their highest and best use for this effort. Next slide, please. This next goal really in set of innovations really focus on these new service models. So this first one is really all about technology deployment and integration. As Morven mentioned, we heard a lot from the various systems throughout this process about things that you're already doing on a regional basis to deploy technology, to integrate technologies. We believe that we need to explore that at a higher level. As we know, and we've heard from Craig a while ago with Apple Cart, there's been a lot of information and good ideas that have been both generated and shared and used in this process. We believe this is another opportunity to do things such as looking at scheduling software opportunities that might be out there, looking at this whole form of contactless payment and fare systems and technologies that exist, integrating those technologies to provide, again, better support to our transit systems, and more importantly, to give reassurances to passengers that it's safe to ride our systems and use our systems again. Next slide. So as with the other things, this would look to develop a work group. As I mentioned, there's a lot of different examples of things that are already going on within both North Carolina and as well as within the country that could be used and leveraged to help advance some of the technology deployment across the state. Next slide, please. This would also look at researching the industry best practices, sharing that guidance, putting that information directly on the newly created NCDOT repository. This just visually gives you some examples of things that are going on out there in the world of transit right now. Again, as we found, there are a lot of things that are happening quickly, both domestically and internationally, and a lot of exciting opportunities to look at this and how these technologies and resources could be leveraged. Next slide, please. So last but not least, the DOT has created and deployed some pilot programs across various parts of the state. The one that's highlighted here is the ICPTA program in Elizabeth City that looked at trip scheduling enhancements for older adults and individuals with disability and low income. They were the recipient of an FTA Mobility for All grant and are working directly with NCDOT. Again, we believe that as we get into this work and further the work, that we'll identify more opportunities for collaborations across the state between systems to come together to better leverage both resources and technologies going forward. Next slide. So our final innovation that we want to cover this morning is a focus on statewide microtransit project development. So as you see here, the state has worked with Wilson specifically in the development of a sort of change in their transit services from a fixed route transit system to microtransit. Wilson, and for those of you who don't know that are listening in, microtransit is a form of on-demand transit service that's out there to provide more direct response to riders in their needs of destinations and locations, whether it's first mile, last mile, kinds of things. It operates, in my easy way of explaining it, similar to some of the other transportation network service providers that are out there like Uber or Lyft. Typically, these arrangements are made between local governments and private sector companies. It's more of an on-demand system. I think the thing that I continue to read about and hear about most that's most appealing to this is how much it really appeals to the riders who are using the services. In this case, again, the city of Wilson took an innovative approach and basically replaced their fixed route system with this kind of concept. This allows patrons to call in, schedule a ride, or online schedule a ride. The things that you hear about from patrons are they like it because it's typically on time, much more reliable than other forms of transit service. B, it is typically less more of a door-to-door kind of service where you can pick up people and take them directly to their destinations, versus a lot of our systems in North Carolina are still what I call hub and spoke traditional systems, where it may take an hour to get from one place to another. This is more of a direct point-to-point kind of service. But the focus here is really to expand this, to look at other systems that might be out there that would benefit from this. Next slide, please. So this would look to develop a work group, certainly survey the transit agencies, find out who might have a need for this service, what uses might exist, how we would go about deploying it in other places for other important locations and other important uses. Next slide, please. Again, create information, share information with systems, look at learning from what we've learned from Wilson and what we'll learn from working together and exploring other systems that are out there. Final slide. So again, the whole focus here would be to identify those systems that may benefit from microtransit, have some kind of a more complete review of that, and potentially, whether it's expanding pilot projects, creating new pilot projects, finding opportunities for how this could be better utilized and sharing those successes across the state. That's really what it's all about. So again, those real quickly are just the top 8 innovations that have come out of the process that we've gone through over the past many months. I did want to, at this point in time, turn it over to Julie. And Julie, if you could, actually, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Julie because I think Julie's got some important information to share. And then she can introduce again David Howard to give us some additional information. So Julie.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. Wow, it's been a really great session. A lot of great content today. Thrilled with the amount of participation. Thrilled to have these innovations that we've come to in these needs for our systems. And that really led our team to sit down and think and talk about, okay, we've identified the needs. What can we as the DOT do to move this forward? And we are really excited to announce that we intend to reserve a portion of the NCDOT CARES Act administrative funds to assist with the implementation of these identified innovative needs. We at the DOT are allowed to reserve up to 10% of the CARES Act funds that we administer for use to help fund our administrative purposes. But in this case, we're going to elect to take a reduced amount and use that funding instead to help move these initiatives forward as efficiently as possible. So we are really excited to be able to do this for our systems. Please look for more details soon from Heather and her team, Heather Hildebrand, our interim director of integrated mobility, and her team on the specifics for how much we're going to set aside, which initiatives we're going to be doing first. More to come on that. But in addition to that, we will continue to pursue FTA discretionary funds to support these project initiatives. As everyone knows, I like to brag on our team has gotten super good at winning federal grants. So we will continue to do that, including the COVID-19 Research and Demonstration Program, which we recently applied for to develop vehicle and facility air management design standards. So fingers crossed we hear that announcement soon and are able to advance that particular initiative. And so with that, I get to hand it off to David Howard, our Chief Deputy Secretary, so that he can bring us home.
Thank you, Julie. Once again, thank you all. Without your hard work and dedication, both to North Carolina Transit Cares initiative, and to your local communities, none of this would be possible. I want you to know that NCDOT exists to support you in your efforts. This very initiative emerged from the department's desire to help our transit systems in the areas that we feel are the most critical, that they feel are the most critical. And that commitment does not end today. So what are our next steps? The Integrated Mobility Division will continue to coordinate and collaborate with transit systems to implement various initiatives and strategies developed through this project. In the near future, following the recommendations of this project, we will begin creating work groups to further develop action plans and to begin implementing solutions. Our staff will also continue to pursue federal grants, as Julie just shared, and they've gotten really good at it. Really good at it, to find and other funding to support these initiatives. We've been very successful in winning grants for very innovative projects. Over the last 6 months, we have successfully won 3 grants totaling $650,000. This includes an AIM grant for micro transit services in Wilson, which you heard about, the Mobility for All project in Northeast North Carolina, which you've heard about today also. And we have recently applied, as I think you've heard already, for a grant for $390,000 from FTA's COVID Research Demonstration Program to help partner in partnership with UNC and Johns Hopkins University. We think that we have a good shot at winning that grant as well. Our plans for the future may change as needs evolve, but NCDOT will support transit systems through future challenges and work with you to find solutions, just as we're doing today. The North Carolina Transit Cares Project has proven what we have already known, that our transit systems know best their needs and their challenges. This project has been extremely important in allowing us to understand how best we can help you. And we want to thank Julie and her team for the work that they've done on this project, especially to you, Jim. Thank you for your leadership on this one. When Julie brought the idea to me and she said your name, I knew it was going to be a success. So thank you, Jim, for you and your team's hard work. Again, I appreciate you all for being here and appreciate your continued commitment to providing vital transportation services to North Carolina's residents. And now, I was looking for him a few minutes ago, and I don't know if I saw him on. I want to turn it over to the chairman of our Board of Transportation, Mike Fox, for closing remarks. Mike, are you there?
I am here, David. Can you hear me?
I can. All right, all yours, Mike.
All right.
Hey, I saw you on TV last night.
Yeah, he said that. He said you won. He said you won the rezoning, so good for you.
Yeah, I was busy last night. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. I was able to catch most of this. I had an earlier call, but I was able to jump in, and what a great program. As David has said, I'm Mike Fox. I'm from Greensboro, as you can tell from the shout out from Jim Westmoreland. And I wear many hats. One of them is I'm the chairman of the State Board of Transportation, which is obviously oversees, policy for transportation with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. But 2 other very important hats that I wear are I'm also on the board of PART and Go Triangle. So I'm directly involved and knowledgeable about all of the challenges that our transit systems are facing due to COVID-19. And they truly are unprecedented, as is almost everything about COVID-19. But, it's clear that in times of crisis like this, it's, in addition to just kind of getting through it, it's important to have strategic and visionary solutions that will not only get through it, but will get us through it better and put us on a better path at the other end of it. We've learned a lot. I know all through COVID. I don't think we've ever realized, how many options for cleaning things that there are, or the presentation about how the air circulates. I thought that was fascinating, and so let's take advantage of the things that we've learned and really use it going forward. This NC Transit Cares project is all about doing that. And you've heard today really 4 key challenge areas that we've identified for all transit systems. And thank you for everyone for collaborating on that. They are the health and safety of transit passengers and employees, and that is primary and important. And I think all of our systems have done a great job of focusing on that. The next one is offsetting ridership declines due to COVID-19. The third is bringing us back to pre-COVID revenue and funding levels. And then last and certainly equally important are accommodating and continuing to look at future mobility innovations such as microtransit, like Jim just discussed. And the good news is, coming out of this conference today, we've now got actionable solutions and next steps, both in the short and long term, on all of those things. And that's no small accomplishment. And you should all pat yourself on the back for getting to this point, because in this unprecedented pandemic that we're dealing with, just getting through the next day is sometimes something that is challenging to do, particularly when we're dealing with potential exposures and employees and riders. And I know all of you have had many a day where you've had to deal with a sudden crisis because of those things, and you've had to rearrange your workforce and your schedule to do that, and that is not easy, and it wears on you every day. And thank you for keeping one foot in front of the other during this, and in addition to doing that, also looking forward and seeing how we can come out of the other end of this tunnel better than we came into it. Some of these things involve, working groups, long-term campaigns. Obviously, all of our working groups are a little different now. We've all become much better at technology like we're using right now. I couldn't have told you what Zoom was, in January, but I really know what it is now. And I know all the other programs too, and so, that's the kind of flexibility and adaptability that is really critical to keeping these transit systems going and serving the public during this time. We've also, got to keep focused on coordination among, various state and federal agencies, as was referenced earlier about, the FTA and NCDOT. And we've got to stay flexible. I think if anything, this pandemic has taught all of us that flexibility is such a critical trait to have, because you can make great plans and then something happens and you're just going in a totally different direction. You've just got to deal with it. Your workforce has got to deal with it. Your ridership has got to deal with it. And I hope that a lasting thing to come out of this that would be positive would be we would all have a little more flexibility and a little more patience in understanding that, boy, we may have this plan, but that's just not going to happen today because of things that are beyond our control. And I know that all of our systems have done that, and I'm really proud of that, as a member of the Board of Transportation and as a North Carolinian. And, at DOT, we're always committed to work to build a stronger and better North Carolina. And we want to work with you and do our part to help, as Julie mentioned, secure funding, coordinate, with all of our partners and keep everybody innovating and experimenting, because that's how real dynamic solutions come out of this. There's a precedent here, a recent precedent that I know, Julie and David are very proud of transit being innovative and problem solving during disasters. And that, if you look back to, some of the recent hurricanes that we've had, and where transit played a critical role in evacuating people who didn't have another means of getting out of those areas where the hurricanes were going to hit or were going to flood. And so I think, you know, we can do the same thing in this disaster. We can be innovative. We can show that we can still find a way to operate. And not only that, we can find a way to provide services that people really need at this desperate time. You know, it's often said that it's easy to be a leader in good times, but in challenging times, that's when we demand, you know, the circumstances demand even more leadership and more creativity. And I know you're all tired. We're all tired, but you know, we've got to press on and not let our guard down. We've got to keep doing those things that have proven to be safe and provide for the health and safety of our employees and our ridership. And you know, the enthusiasm that you have all shown for this program, I think, is indicative of what we have to look forward, you know, to going forward, and the innovations that will come out of this. And so I just really want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank our NCDOT staff, you know, for the tireless work, you know, not only just putting this together, but everything they do, you know, in the daily operation. It's really critical to so many of our citizens. And as a board member, I'm really appreciative. I often am in the fortunate position of being able to, you know, people give me credit for that. And if they really, you know, knew what was going on, they would know where all the work is actually being done. And I recognize that, and I appreciate that. And I will say again, David and Julie, thank you very much for what you do. And thank you all for participating today and bringing your energy and your enthusiasm. And I look forward to great things coming out of the other end of that. And with that, David, I'll hand it back to you. You're still on mute, David, I think. Or put your headphones back on.
So I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap it up for you. Thank you, Chairman Fox, and again, just a great thank you to all of the NC Transit Systems who have been involved in this initiative. I too would be remiss if I didn't mention those other members of our team and companies that were involved in pulling this together. So WSP through Morgan McLean and Rachel Gaylord Miles, specifically, thank you very much for your help and contributions. I think for those of you who have been involved, and I think this was a sort of an insight of Julie's initially, WSP has a plethora and a deep bench as it relates to transit expertise. They are national leaders, and I would tell you that if you have a question or need related to things that are going on in the transit space, give Morgan and WSP a call. The other partner that we had involved with this was Warren Miller and Maddie Shea with Fountain Works. I know they've had other team members involved as well. But Warren and his team are excellent, as you can see today, in terms of running this kind of technology, putting together forums that engage those members of the community, your team, that need to be involved, strategic planning kinds of initiatives. So thank you to both Fountain Works and to WSP for your time and involvement. But again, thank you very much to Chairman Fox, Secretary Boyette, Chief Deputy Howard, Julie White, and last but not least, thank you so much to Ryan Brumfield as the project manager and Heather Hildebrandt. You indeed were the rudders to this ship as we sort of sailed down this incredible way of navigating our streams of NC Transit Cares. And we can't thank you enough for that help and support. So stay tuned. There will be more information coming to each one of you. We will need your help and support with work groups and other things to help really take advantage of this. And my final comment is thank you again to David Rue and NCPTA for your partnership, help, support. Love you very much. Thank you. Everybody have a great day, and thank you for your participation.